Sugar, we consume it every day, it's contained in all foods, we're already addicted to it, and where there's no sugar, there's sugar substitute. The thing is far less sweet and more dangerous to your health. The sugar monopoly took over the world a long time ago. They feed us and our kids can't do it without sugary sodas. But is sugar really so safe that it's a good idea to puff up and feed it to us? And at the end of the day, how do you get rid of it? Is it a terrible addiction? Let's get this straight. Hey everybody, it's Dawn. Just think, our love to sweets is comparable to tobacco and drug addiction. Sugar increases the body's levels of the happiness hormone, dopamine, and improves mood. Over time the effect tapers off, and to achieve the necessary concentration of dopamine again and not get depressed, the person keeps upping the dose. Nothing. Doesn't ring a bell. But if you suddenly decide to just give up sweets, all of which can cause you to have a real withdrawal that requires treatment. It's worth realizing that sugar is a product not created by nature, but by human civilization, so its consumption is unnatural and it's not healthy. Pre-sugar has been obvious to everyone for a long time now, and many people are trying to cut back on it in your diet as much as you can. It is already a start on the right path, but despite this, we continue to eat it too much. And yet, which foods are a ticking time bomb? Actions that shouldn't be used at all. Now I'm going to tell you about it in a couple words. The first is, of course, canned inconvenience foods. Not only are they made out of tomatoes, so they're packed with tons of sugar to make you to taste anything at all. The second thing is sausages and frankfurters. Different sauces, sugar could be anywhere. It's a good flavor enhancer that is used on just about everything in all industries, so it's easy enough to read labels and try not to consume these foods in huge quantities. Because in addition to sugar, there's a lot more something interesting. First of all, in order to understand what place should be taken sugar in our lives, it would be nice to shake up basic knowledge of biological chemistry and the very history of its appearing in our lives. Let's think back to the discovery of America. This new light has brought us more than just a bunch of problems and knowledge, but also many new kinds of plants. Of course, it was mostly gold and silver that was searched for, but they found something much more dangerous: sugar. On his second voyage, Christopher Columbus took out sugarcane sprouts and planted them on the land, now occupied by the Dominican Republic, and to the admiral's great joy, the saplings took root and went up quickly. And then the sugar epidemic began. People are hooked. Animal experiments support these findings. Rats that have been on a high-fat diet for a long time of sugar exhibited all the symptoms of drug addiction, right down to withdrawal and relapses. They also showed a propensity for alcoholism and were more easily have fallen into dependence on opiate, which was not the case with the rodents in the control group, where the diet just didn't change. Moreover, the rats that tasted both sugar and drug, choosing between the two, more often entrepreneurial chemists and anthropologists specializing in the impact of medical issues on society, notes that in any media discourse related to the sugar, the interests of both parties always collide: sugar companies and their antagonists. Sugar substitute manufacturers and the latter, more often than not, finance themselves studies pointing to the harms of sugar and the benefit of all of the same substitutes, while sugar and sweetened sugar producers of food have more problems in the honey, illuminating the results of these studies. And the result, psychologically speaking, is that sugar is the most obvious food hook that a mass of fears, prejudices, misconceptions. After all, the neophytes of healthy eating, struggling to addiction, seriously comparing it to drug addiction. But the trap is that the more a person is fixated on their sugar intake, the harder he can control that consumption. Now, it's hard to imagine, but originally sugar was not at all a consumer product. In ancient times, honey was responsible for the sweetness. Tailors would walk through the forests and gather wild honey, and then used it for its intended purpose, intended use, and for adding to baked goods and beverages. Well, what about sugar? Sugar was for the elite. True, it remained an expensive imported product, until the German coup d'etat in the industry did not extract sugar from beets directly in the lands of his native Germany. This has saved a lot of money on production and shipping costs, and sugar has infiltrated every kitchen. And if at the beginning of the 20th century, one man consumed an average of 17 kilograms of sugar a year, now, a Russian eats about 40 tons of food a year. Along with sugar consumption, bellies grow, cases of disease, heart disease, and a huge number of deaths from diabetes. Scientists who have tried to explain it in any way, they are split into several camps. those who adhered to the sugar theory and those who thought it was just a fiction. But choosing whose research to invest in, the Sugar Association attracted representatives from a huge industry. Coca-Cola, General Mills, these are American huge brands, and they invested in them because it was profitable, but at the same time, they denied the sugar monopoly itself. After all, most of the money was given to researchers whose work have clearly been targeted for sugar rehab. Therefore, the applications for sponsorship turned out to be appropriate. For example, one scientist, to prove the aerotherapeutic value of sugar in treating depression, said sugar was good for you, chocolate for the mood. That's roughly what the slogans were. But still, sooner or later, any empire will collapse. And at the end of the last century, in the United States, it broke out a huge scandal. The real conspiracy has been uncovered. Turns out sugar manufacturers were bribing medical companies. And it's all for the sake of the conclusion. What did they need it for? It's very simple. We had to cover up the harm of sugar. And for the money of entrepreneurs, the scientists drew false conclusions, hiding or minimizing the harm of sugar in every way possible. They were hiding what sweetly causes diabetes and obesity, heart disease, and even cancer. It could all be called the scam of the century. After all, for decades, people have believed in manufacturer created to the sugar legend, that getting fat doesn't just happen from fatty foods, but from the manufacturers of fats. Still, this version of it was not at all satisfactory, and the redistribution with the zone of influence began. And as a result, the sugar conspiracy has gone into hiding. And on the store shelves, there are new, more expensive, and less unhealthy foods, but the demand for them, of course, was not great. After all, the manufacturer knows that sugar makes us happy, and adds it just about everywhere. After all, it's not just what we take a spoonful from the saucer. There is a hidden sugar that can be contained in any food, any baked goods, even plain water. It's no secret that many coffees and restaurants add sugar into foodstuffs, in various dishes, all sorts of sauces, sodas, bars. And the point of this is that sugar makes people eat even more sugar. This post, for example, has generated a lot of discussion in my Telegram, and I think it's worth talking about here. This is knowledge that everyone will benefit from. After all, our health is at stake. E120 and E904. These additives, found in many food products that are derived from insects. Yes, you heard right. These are the products they feed us. Currently, there are over 100 products containing these additives, and most of them, they're products designed to children. It's worth knowing what we feed our children. I'm looking for details about how they try to manipulate us, what they're trying to feed us. You can find Dawn on my Telegram. The truth is always dangerous, but that's the truth. The link is in the comments. Not long ago, in the United States, they found documents confirming an unpleasant fact. Manufacturers of sugar and sugary carbonated beverages, already in the late 1960s, have had information that these products provoke the development of deadly diseases. However, they hid this secret from the public. Well, later on, further evidence that the soda companies knew the dangers of their products, discovered by a group of independent researchers. They studied the materials that have been conducted over the last half a century under the auspices of the International Sugar Research Foundation. And while digging through the archives, the team came across a curious experiment held from 1967 to 1971. In the course of these experiments, a British biologist and his colleagues watched as the menu, almost entirely that consisted of sugar, was affecting the health of several dozen lab rats. And fairly quickly, researchers discovered two negative effects that were associated with this product. Not only did it lead to obesity, but also accelerated the accumulation of triglycerides and other blood fats in rodents, which increased the risk of heart and vascular problems. Even according to the WHO, they don't deny it. Almost half of all diseases, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, are linked to obesity. The main spreaders of this epidemic are sugar and sugary food sodas, which are universally popular. And it is now clear that decades, all manufacturers put sugar in all products, all so that they can at least have their flavor. All possible curds, sweet drinks, very much loved including children, which is why we have a rising tide of childhood diseases that are now very hard to stop. But it's worth realizing that everything up to the last moment is in our hands. We ourselves can keep track of what we eat, what our children eat, what books we read, and what movies we watch. So subscribe to the channel if you are one of those who wants to wake up. And remember, dawn is just around the corner. All the best.